Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. A true fall garden. That's what we're going to talk about today. It's important that we talk about a true fall garden for many reasons. Have you ever had a live fall garden?
A faux fall garden? Absolutely, I have.
Yeah. It's funny. Before we really got in, I really got into having a fall garden. I had a faux fall garden
Mm,
many years.
yeah.
But when I started to look at it differently, it changed everything completely. So,
Yeah, there were years and years where I didn't consider, even though the calendar had fall, what I was growing was a fall garden. And then I understood, like, oh, let me say this. Then heard the concept of a fall garden and what I thought I was doing as a fall garden, which was the faux fall garden. Like, it took me probably about a year to figure out what I had done, wasn't it? And
yeah, absolutely. All right, but before we get started, let's do this. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. I am your host, Ben, and I am with my co host, Miss Batavia. There she is, big smiles. If you want to support the show, you may do so by what can you do? Oh, you can become a subscriber. You can become a patron. Come check us out on YouTube. Give us a subscribe, a like, leave a comment. We always like comments. And we do clips every week. We do the episodes, all that stuff. So come join us there. We have our Amazon list below, which has all the stuff we like. And I think, seeds. Buy some seeds from us. We have seeds from our seed shop. Link is below for that. And if you buy 2 packs of seeds now, you get a free pack of seeds. So take advantage of that because the fall gardening season is upon us. And I know it's depressing, but it is time to start seeds and start preparing. Ding dong. Okay, so let's do this. Let's break this down into a couple different ways. First thing is, why is a fall garden even important? And when I ask that question, Batavia, what I mean is, why is it important to you?
oh wow, we worked through this. I didn't know it was going to be spotlight on me.
Well, I'll
Way
do
to
it for
switch
me
things
too.
up. Because it feeds, no pun intended, directly into my desire to grow as much and as long as I can. Right. So when I talk about I want a 3 season garden, it's just not to be able to say, hey, I grow in 3 seasons, but it's to take advantage of my growing time as best as I can. So that's why it's important to me.
Okay, that makes sense. For me, it's changed over the years many times.
Mm.
Um, for me, though, one of the things is it's the health benefits that come out of a fall crop. There's just, in my, the way we eat in our house, we do seasonal eating. So, if it's in season, we eat it. If it's not, we try not to eat it. And when we grow it in our garden, obviously it's in season. So we can get our harvest going much longer. And in where I am in coastal North Carolina, we can really get the harvest going into the winter. We will have some plants that will hold over through the winter and not give us anything until very late winter into very late winter, not really the calendar spring season. But that's why we enjoy it. And over the years, our fall garden has changed many different times. We were joking earlier about a faux fall garden, and
Mm.
the episode is about having a true, legit fall garden. So, what does that look like to you?
Well, let me start with what it's not. It's not just a copy and paste of spring, right? Although
Yeah,
in some cases it may look like that from what you're growing, like your list of vegetables, but I try to look at it as, and a little bit to your point, one, it's my last dance for the garden season, right? So growing outdoors, it's going to be the last of it when it comes to the fall garden. And I want to make sure that I am growing crops that I truly know that I'm going to be both be able to store and enjoy over the next number of weeks and months. So it's not just lettuce, which I love. Um, it is probably fewer plants, but more diversity, right? So if you think about some of the root crops that I start in the spring, some of those don't necessarily make it in the same volume as they would for fall, right? So it'll be a smaller batch of carrots, it'll be a smaller batch of beets. It may be more turnips just based on kind of their storing and the desire to eat some of those things more so in the fall and winter. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, a faux fall garden is it's like the ultimate trick, right? In my opinion, it's like you want summer to keep going, you want to keep it going, but much to your point of this is your last hurrah for the year.
Mhm.
But if I'm gonna have a last hurrah, I want to have a banger. You know what I mean? I want to have a thriving last hurrah. And what does that mean? That means big, beautiful plants, bigger harvests that last longer and go into the season that I don't have to stress out about. I don't have to worry about them constantly. And we can make it all the way through. You know, generally speaking, and you've done this in your area in
Mhm.
Chicago, you can harvest up until the first day of winter,
Mhm.
right? So
Yes.
if you think about that, you're growing throughout the entire fall season. So a true fall garden, and we've said this many times, it consists of cool season plants. But
Mhm.
again, Batavia said it, I think, very well, is it's not the same as a spring garden. It's the same kind of plants, but the timing is completely different.
Yeah.
You expect different things. It's, you know, whereas on one hand, you're expecting in the spring, you're expecting things to bolt. You know, you're having issues with heat, but it's the opposite here where you're not really expecting things to bolt. You're expecting things to get cold, you're expecting them to die off. And we know that, so we have to plant differently. And that's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, it's funny because it all kind of comes back to time, right? So in the spring, I'm worried that I may not have enough time for something to get to its true potential based on the heat coming on. And, so does it completely mature based on, June heat? Maybe not, right?
Yeah.
Had some experiences with that this year, and previous years. In the fall, it is more so on the front end when it comes to when I'm planting, does it then have enough time to mature based on things like daylight hours, right? Not cooler temperatures because we welcome that, but daylight hours. Is it going to get up to size? Because growing, in my experience, is slower once we get into the fall,
Yeah.
right? Things don't
Much
take
slower.
off and start running like they do these same types of crops in the spring.
Yeah. And I mean, part of it too is, you know, when you have a true fall garden, and we're going to get to a minute, really break down what a faux fall garden is. But when you get into a true fall garden, you start your fertilization's different, your
Mhm.
planting's different, your weather's different, your watering's
Watering's different.
different. Don't you ever pull the words out of my mouth like that again,
Mhm.
young
Every
lady.
time.
We've been doing this way too long. Um, so you know, it's one of those things where like everything is different,
Mhm.
but if you take a second and you look at, like, you know, we joke about a faux fall garden. Well, what is that? What does that mean? Well, basically, it's like your fall tomatoes. You know, having another planting of peppers, having another planting of corn going all the way up until your frost. There's nothing wrong with that, but in the world, in the backyard gardens world, where we really want to focus on well-rounded gardens that last as long into the year as you can possibly get. And look, I hear you. I want to take a break. I hear you. You're going to get a break.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody relax. You're going to get a break. But you start all those plants that I just mentioned are all going to die when the first frost comes.
Yeah.
And we've said it time and time again, these other plants that are meant for spring and fall really will not die after your first frost, and in fact will really start to grow for the weeks after your first frost. And if you've never done it before, it can be a bit of you know a shock at how it can go. I know it was for me. When I started a fall garden, my first year I did like cabbages, broccolis, radishes, turnips, rutabagas, lettuce, cilantro, like all that stuff. I was shocked after we got a frost how those things really kicked into gear and started growing to where it changed my mind forever on how I will grow a garden in the fall.
Yeah, I think my first wake up to wait, hold on, there's something here was a year that I picked up some transplants for kale. And I planted them maybe in August, maybe early September. And when I saw, which is very different than planting kale for me in Chicago in the spring and letting it live in my garden all the way until the cold. Like that's a full fall garden to me. Sure, it's going to round out my garden, right? I'm not going to pull my collards if they're still healthy and they were planted back in April. Like that's I'm not going to do that, but that's not the fall garden that I'm talking about or we're talking about here. So transplanting those kale plants in, seeing that young growth turn into kind of more mature plants as we went to, this calendar fall date and then got into October, got into November. It's something to see healthy young crops in your garden, as you see these other plants from summer kind of waning,
Yeah.
right? So that same timing that I was putting in those kale plants, my tomato plants, and I didn't have the consciousness of that then, but my tomato plants were looking pitiful, right? And I just happened to have a space that opened up that I said, all right, I saw the kale starts. Let me go pick these up. The key here, though, is for me in my area, and I know it's like this for a lot of folks, the pickings are almost non existent for starter plants that time of year. And this is a large part of why we're talking about this now, right? So for me to repeat that, I can't even guarantee that same store is going to have those plants for me to buy,
Yeah.
to get into the garden at that time. So for me to repeat that, which that kale planted in September as transplants are absolutely a part of my fall garden. Like I'm sowing seeds like day before yesterday. You
Yeah.
know?
And I mean, the thing is, too, and a lot of times we will come on
And
here.
I'm sorry, that's starting seeds indoors is what I mean.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
We talk periodically about not letting the big box stores and what the plants have really totally guide you.
Mhm.
But as you start to get more and more into fall, I think this is a good time to let it guide you a little bit because
Mm.
you'll start to see less tomatoes and less
Mhm.
peppers and
Mhm.
less of this, that, and the other. And I think that's a good indication that, like, hey, maybe I need to back off because I don't know about you, but for me, fall is a very confusing time because you still get solid heat, warm nights, but it can be confusing because you're like, oh, it's not going to come. It's not going to come. I got plenty of time. But then next thing you know, the bottom falls out and it's cold or it's cool. And when I say cool, it's too cool for some of these plants. The first year I really did a second crop of tomatoes, I was picking up green tomatoes off the ground and ripening them on the house because they were just dropping them left and right. So, and I know we're sitting here saying, like, don't plant a full fall garden, but there's a place for your second crop of tomatoes and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I use that particularly, if I have a bed that I want to let rest over the winter and even into the fall, because my fall plantings can go all the way through the winter a lot of times. I may use the second crop of tomatoes, my fall tomatoes, to allow that, because by the time they die out, it's
Mhm.
almost too late. I may be able to put something small in, but the growth overall is done. So that bed would be used to just rest and do what it needs to do. So I do factor that into my plan. But if you come over to Sandy Bottom Homestead, you'll see there's going to be a full fall garden going, and it's going to go as long as possible. And we're not even really going to spend too much time talking about like building covers and stuff like that. We've done that a lot, and we both do that on our YouTube channels. So, if you want to see that, you can go. We're not really focusing on that. What we're focusing on is actually getting these plants in the ground at the right time so that you
Yeah.
can ride the season through. And so a true fall
Oh, I love it.
garden
Yeah.
consists of, brassicas, lettuces, root crops. I mean, essentially think about it this way. Roots and leaves is what you're going to be growing. And if
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
think about it like that and you grow those things, then you're going to have an easier mob at a time in the garden, and it'll work to your advantage. So
Mhm.
just try and keep a true fall garden on your radar. And we want to talk about this now. I know everybody's like, "Oh, it's too early. I haven't even gotten my first tomatoes yet." But now's the time. We're always a season ahead.
Well, it's interesting because your instincts tell you kind of when you should be shifting as far as planting goes. So there's a time in June, July, August that I don't think twice about temperature as far as loads go for my summer garden. I don't think twice about it. And in Chicago, I'm rarely thinking about is it too hot for my summer plants, right? It's a rarity. Um, Once we get to September, that's when my shift goes to not September 1, but once we get to mid to late September as we're transitioning to the actual fall calendar date, I start to think, gosh, how many more are these plants going to produce?
Yeah.
Are these plants going to, will this tomato ripen? So now I'm watching it on the other end of it. Remember how when you first get your first tomatoes, you're watching them green and you're ready for the first ones to turn red. Now I'm on the other end of the season for summer, thinking like, oh, I wonder if this is actually going to mature on the plant, right? So that's your instinct saying, huh, like, you're pushing a boundary, which I'm all about, but are you pushing the right boundary? Right? Because your weather now is shifting. And then when I get into October, I am watching the calendar as in I may need to save these things. Meaning like I need to dash out and, pull these every year it's this, pull some of these, fruits off the plant because, right? And the reality is that same bed that had the tomatoes, we did this in the front yard last year, pull the tomato plants early as the example. Once I got my fall plants in, this is what should have happened. I wouldn't have had those same worries, right? Because this weather that we had in October is ideal for it. The mistake I made last year, which is one of the mistakes that I want to avoid this year, I want you to avoid this year, is I direct sowed things in my front yard sunniest bed for fall. And those plants struggled because when I direct sowed them, as that was the right timing, it was still too hot for those plants to thrive. Right. And so instead, I ended up with, a bed that was prepped for the spring because nothing really grew in it in the fall.
Yeah.
Right. But I was still pleased to not have to do the dance with tomatoes in that space, to be quite frank.
So I don't necessarily agree with you that our instincts tell us.
Mm.
Um, I think I think the changing of the weather will tell you, but that instinct is wrong.
Mm.
Um, I think the true instinct comes in time with practice and trial and error. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is, when you start, if you, let's say that you ignore this show, or the couple of people like, I don't want to hear fall, I just turned it off, which we know that's going to happen. Um, and it comes into September and you go to plant, you're too late. Plain and simple,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
no
Yeah.
questions asked. The instinct is, you know, you develop it over time to where it's like, yeah, it's going to get cool. and you start developing that instinct of like, okay, well, when does the seeds need to be started? And then you take that and you apply your knowledge to it that you did. And what I want to say out loud, and it's not very popular, is why is it that you have people starting tomato seeds 6 months ahead of time for summer, but nobody, and when I say nobody, it's loosely, but the majority of people are not starting their cabbage seeds 6 weeks before time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the excitement around spring that in your summer garden. And I get it. Tomatoes are fun to grow. You get big red fruit, you pull them and all that stuff. But when you break it down like that, if you start putting that excitement into your fall garden, it's going to be completely different. And it only takes one season. Right
Mhm.
now in my house, I smell the smell of egg rolls being cooked for freezing.
Mm.
My wife's in there. She's cooking. I think she's making like 100 egg rolls.
Oh,
We
wow.
harvested those cabbages a month ago,
Uh-huh,
and I
uh-huh.
opened the fridge the other day, and I was like, "Oh, I was like, there's 4 cabbages in here. We got to do something." So
Yeah.
we're making the egg rolls with them, but you're not gonna have those tomatoes in the fall last another month to do something with them. You're not going to. So if you if here's an idea. If you want to have more tomatoes, like, you just miss growing them, just grow more in the summer and grow so many that you get sick and tired of them and you don't want them anymore. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of like how you can combat that. But, we get tired of canning tomatoes. So we welcome the death of our tomato plants. Now, we will have a break and hopefully we will get another, I know that my fall flush of tomatoes, and it's always questionable if it will or won't be successful, but I know that that flush of tomatoes will not be as hot and heavy as what we're getting now.
Yeah.
So we know that. And then we know we'll have some fresh stuff because we do want to have tomatoes and lettuce. We want to have salad ingredients trying to come out around the same time. It's always been a joke of mine. I was like, what the hell? Why do we eat salads the way they do? You can't grow them at the same time. It's like unnatural, but that's our goal. But we know and we plan for it. And that's something that we want to have for our true fall garden too. And maybe there's an argument for making different kinds of salads in the fall too. I don't know.
So, I don't want to beat this horse here, but I think that we are closer to the your instincts will tell you than you noted that we were. Because I'm not saying that this September when you walk out and you're looking around and saying, "Gosh, the temperatures are getting cool. I wonder if my tomato plants are gonna be okay." And that should be the indicator. I'm not saying this September that's gonna happen. I'm saying in past September
Gotcha.
that happened to you, right? And that was your garden gnome that's inside of you trying to nudge you in the right way. Like, if you're wondering now, "Hey, when should I really be planting a fall garden?" Like, look back on what you've experienced previously, and that shift happened, and you experienced it in the garden. And now think about if you had, again, some transplants that you put into the garden. In some cases, I am starting some things by seed. Spinach is something that's evaded me, over and over and over again. I had one great year of spinach, and I'm going to go back to repeat that as far as my planting direct seeding time for that. Although I do know some people have some luck with transplanting very, very young spinach transplants, but that's another conversation. I look at it and I say, it's okay if you just want to ride it out to the last bit. But for me, and Ben and I were talking about this beforehand, there's a certain level of stress that comes to me in the garden at the beginning of the season and then at the end of the season. And all of it's around timing. It's what I should have been doing at the beginning of the season that I'm trying to get done. And as of this recording, we're quite literally still in that moment. And at the end of the season, it's are these things going to survive? These things that I've been, for some of the stuff, like a tomato plant that I'm looking at in September or October, I started that thing in February or March. right? Like it's done its job, right? And so my energy can be placed elsewhere where it's less stressful. We talked about this, I want to say even last year. If you're plotting this out, like your point of 6 months ahead of time, I've always seen leggy seedlings like in the late winter, early spring. I've never seen anyone post about my cabbage and broccoli plants are too big that I plan on planting out for fall. Like, gosh, I
Never.
started too early. Never ever. And I rarely say never. Never have I seen that. And so I mean, I feel like I'm beating this point, and trying to drive it home, but yeah, it's in our hands. And gosh, I wish if you're watching or if you're listening, come to one of our platforms, whether it's in the Backyard Gardens community garden Facebook page, whether it's on the comment section for this episode, like maybe prove us wrong. There's evidence that says folks don't want to hear about this now, but we know that it's for the better for us as gardeners and for y'all that want to have fall gardens. But, let us know that no, yeah, you do want to hear about it now. Like this is the time.
Yeah.
Uh, so we can stop introducing this episode. It's like, I know you don't want to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to introduce them like that anymore because it is time. And,
Mhm.
either you're going to listen to it or watch it or you're not. And I mean, I'm the same way. I had a really hard time. But like I said in the top of the show, it was something that was really special when we first started doing a good, solid fall garden. And we were able to see the production that came out. And the really, the only way, in my opinion, to truly extend a garden season with ease is to do this. And it's all about being ahead of the schedule, being ahead of the weather, understanding all of it. And I mean, it does come with challenges, but you can do it piece by piece by piece, and you can really make it happen to where, your first year maybe it's not huge. Maybe you just do a little something a little different. Maybe just do a couple containers. A lot of the produce for fall does really well in containers. And then maybe the next year you do, you're like, oh well, that did great, and then it's off to the races after that. But I know that a lot of gardens, and I'm including myself more so in the past than in recent times, have struggled because maybe in the spring I put out a plant that was too mature or too leggy or something like that. But what that really comes down to, I was desperate to grow in the wintertime, so I started.
Yeah.
But what this did by doing a true fall garden is I almost went to the opposite spectrum to where I had to force myself to grow because I was
Hmm.
like, look, I'm tired of it. I don't want to get, I'd like to have clean fingernails for 3 days. It's just something that I kind of, so I had to go back. And so I had this weird back and forth with it. So, take that, remember that desperation you have in January, and your last frost isn't until April or May, and you're starting your seeds, and good and damn well that it's too early, but you're going to do it anyways. Take that excitement and move it back and think about fall, and you're going to be really thankful. You're going to
Hmm.
have, it's going to be totally different. There's, this isn't, it's not easy. There are definitely some challenges that come with it.
Yeah.
There's a number of challenges that come with it, but it's all over. You can overcome all of it, and you can really, bank it. You've just got to be very astute, and you've got to pay attention to everything.
Hmm. One more comment on why we're starting tomato seeds 6 months before planting them out.
Yeah.
Obviously, not you and I, but I've started some tomatoes pretty early myself. Um, I feel like there's a tie back to how long you've been out of the garden. right? So are some of those folks ending the garden season with their summer plantings? And there are many more months that their gardens are dead compared to they could still have life in the garden if they had true fall plantings out there. Something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to it. So when it comes down to the difficulties, Batavia, um, what's the elephant in the room?
Heat.
The heat. That's
Some like it hot.
some like it cold, some like it in the pot 5 days old. Yeah.
I thought, real quick, and I still struggle with this, but I thought that the biggest issue was me wanting to be outside, wanting gardening to be outside. So not wanting to return to the grow area, right, where I'm starting my seeds. And that's still, it's just discipline, right? But the biggest issue, and I've tried fall in multiple ways. The biggest issue is timing based on the heat. Hard stop for me.
In
What
the
do you think?
for fall?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, the biggest issue is accepting that you're going to be planting in the heat. So it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Still tied to the heat, but like
absolutely.
getting over that hump. Like, are you trying the idea of like waiting for it to get a little bit cooler?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah.
idea of like it's going to get cooler. I know it is. And man, look,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I've had, I can't tell you how many Halloweens I've had dripping sweat in some stupid ass costume that I was just dying to wear. I don't even like, so, I have a child and we go trick or treating as a family. I don't even like, dude, I'll be a pirate for the next 5 years because I can wear tank tops and shorts and stuff. It's like, you know, one year he wanted to be a Pokemon, so my wife, God bless her soul, she made him a crap. I haven't watched Pokemon with him in so long I can't remember. I know somebody listening right now is screaming at this podcast because I can't. Charmeleon, I think is his name. Anyway, she made him a costume. It was an amazing costume. She made it out of fleece. He got 3 houses down the road on October 31st, and he was like, "I'm gonna pass out." You could see him wobbling. He was so hot. He took out. He's
Mm-hmm.
dripping in sweat. If I waited until after
The
that,
weather was cool,
my
yeah.
frost is my cool weather is like 2 weeks away. So there's not a lot of time. So accepting the fact that like these cool season crops, which is what they're called. This is not a term that we made up. These cool season crops going in the heat was very confusing to me. And so dealing with the heat and all that stuff was something we can do, and I mean, quickly to deal with the heat, um, shade, water,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mulch. There's not much
Mm-hmm.
else you can do. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah. I think your transplant time, if you're transplanting things in, is important. So I typically try to transplant things into the garden, no matter the season, on an overcast day.
Mm-hmm.
Even maybe there could be just a little bit of a sprinkle of rain. Um, if I can't get that in the forecast, I'll transplant in the later afternoon, right? And some people don't like this method, but I want my plants to acclimate over the evening and in the night and then come into the new day, even if it's a sunny day, versus transplanting something at 8 a.m. and they have to
Absolutely.
fight, the sun of the day. The third item, so the second for me and the third
Oh,
would
you're gonna do two at
be,
once?
well, I did the first one, which you
Oh
tapped
yeah, I
into.
did.
Yeah. So now I'm going to come back with another one. Um, and this may just be personal. I miss steak, the time that things take to grow in the fall every single year. I underestimate how much longer things are going to take to grow. If I plant the same plant in the spring, I think about, gosh, that thing really took off. And in my mind, the combination of that seed package, maturity time. I get out there and I watch. Now I'm babying that thing that has been growing, those lettuce seeds. This happened 2 years ago. And I'm just looking at them and looking at them. And they're like, they have two true leaves for weeks. Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I always think I have more time than I do, just generally speaking. But then I don't respect the idea that it just takes these things longer to grow. And I'm not talking months longer, but longer to grow this time of year. And you have to give it that chance.
You know, so first of all, when you said I miss steak, I was about to be like, well, go buy a ribeye. It took me a
I
second
actually
because you
have some
paused.
steak thawed. I'm glad you reminded me. Yeah, I need to cook it today. Go
All
ahead.
right. What time's dinner?
Yeah, it's gonna be a late lunch.
Oh, okay.
You know I do.
Um, I think I'll just feed off of you for the rest of the show. You
Mm.
keep bringing up good points. For me, it's almost the same, but what happens in the fall is I get confused because I have just seen plants, just like you said, but not spring plants, but like your tomatoes and stuff like that. I'm harvesting, everything is giant. I'm sitting here trying to figure out like how am I going to get this crop out of my garden so I can move. Oh, I did it again. There's too much of this, and then you go back and you pull everything. You put this little plant in, and you have to understand something too with this time of year. Yes, you're going to be planting in the heat. Yes, you're going to be fighting the heat. But also what that does is it slows the growth down of the plant at
Mhm. Mhm.
first. So you're going to, when you put a plant in the spring, if you've timed it out right, which luckily it's almost foolproof for spring planting, within reason, things will take off very quickly. They may sit stagnant for a little while. And there's a couple things to that will help facilitate that stagnant. One of them, and actually I'm not going to feed off of you because I'm just going to jump into it, is the nutrient load in your garden. So
Mm.
you've
Mhm.
come through a
Mhm.
whole season, you've planted, and it's very depleted. So adding that fertilizer in early before you plant so it can start to break down can help. And you also know if you've done it right, you haven't, like, let's say you put cabbages behind your tomatoes and you pull your tomatoes out, you put your cabbages in. Well, you haven't been giving your tomatoes a lot of nitrogen.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of nitrogen left, but cabbages need a lot of nitrogen. So we've got to get that back into the garden, and you've got to get it in fast, right? So I agree with Batavia completely. Planting in the afternoon, that's like rule number one for me, if possible.
Mhm.
Plant it in the afternoon, late as possible. I like to plant it about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yep.
So it gets a little bit of sunlight, and then, same thing. But then it's like a week later, like go ahead and put some kind of like granular nitrogen down and then come back. And then in a week or so, shoot, once you see some kind of growth, get it to grow. Push it some
Mhm.
liquid
Mhm.
nitrogen of some sort. When I say liquid nitrogen, I don't mean like pure nitrogen. I mean some kind of fertilizer that's higher in nitrogen, and give it that boost because that garden bed is depleted badly. It's already ran a marathon. It's already done a 100-mile bike ride, and it's about to do the 3-mile swim. It's doing the triathlon backwards. It is gassed. So
Mhm.
you've got
Mhm.
to give it its energy shot blocks and all that stuff to get it going. And that's what you got to do because otherwise that plant will sit there and it won't do a damn thing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's fighting between the nutrients, the heat, and quiz time,
And
water.
oh.
Yeah. So,
You told me never to do it again,
yeah.
remember?
So the water is an issue too.
Yeah.
It needs a lot of water, and so
Yeah.
you're gonna have to find a balance. But as the summer season comes to an end, here, let me ask you this, Batavia.
Mm.
Let's say mid-September.
Mhm.
Is your summer garden as lush and thriving as it was in, let's just say, move it mid-August?
Damn you. No,
Like, you got to be honest. You know what I mean?
no,
Like you're looking
no.
at leaves that are like, damn. You're looking at, you're
Hmm.
like, man, this is
I prune this anymore.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's starting to look
um,
a little pitiful, right? But we expect
yeah,
that because
yeah.
we know that season's ending.
Yep,
So do
yep.
you know why the leaves fall off the trees?
I don't know
Do you
why.
know what makes them fall off the trees though? I mean, take a guess.
The temperature?
No, it's the amount of sunlight.
Oh, yeah, that's gonna be a second guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, and then like I use my black eyed peas, right? I'll come out there and about mid September, there's like 5 leaves left on them, you know, and they're still producing somewhat,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
it's that lack of light. They start dropping the leaves. Why do they drop the leaves? Because they don't need them. There's not enough sunlight to
Yeah,
sustain that life.
I was watching my potato plants. So the potato plants, they're just a beautiful thing to me. Although it may have something to do with my love for potatoes, and they were growing up very tall, probably taller than I've seen my potato plants grow up. And then I moved some leaves around and there was yellowing on some leaves at the bottom. And the immediate question is, oh, that's not right. And it isn't. Why is it? And it's absolutely because those leaves are not getting the exposure to the sun based on the growing pattern of these potato plants. Like the leaves that are directly above it and directly above that and directly above that. I think that that's another, nature's instincts are telling you what should be happening in your growing space. Um, I do want to move on. I have one more as
Okay,
far as what
do it.
makes it difficult. And I, this is maybe I'm gonna try to make this the last time I say this all the time about this thing.
Oh gosh, hold on. Let me
Yeah.
hold on. Go.
Uh huh. It's the spacing. So I have had the last couple of seasons an empty bed, and that empty bed coming like midsummer going into fall, and that is an ideal space to grow for fall. Right now, in some cases I do, some cases I've not grown for fall, but there are other cases where I've had plants in a space growing, and I want to sneak in a fall crop, right? And I again misjudge the amount of space those other plants, I can clearly see it, are taking up, and the impact it's going to have on this newly planted thing. So I go back to the disappointment because that was the only lettuce that I tried to grow that year. And my lush pepper plant bed on September 1, it was still lush on September 1, full of fruit. Plants were tall. I tried to carve out a little space to plant direct sow lettuce seeds. I had enough space for that lettuce to grow. It was wide enough, but it was in the furthest bed in the front yard garden. So it was only going to get sun probably from, you know, let's say midday until the sun goes down based on the spacing and the placement of it. But it had to compete with all of the peppers that were growing. Not to mention the watering needs are different from the peppers to these directly sown seeds. So if you have an empty space, you're all set. If you don't have an empty space, be very conscious of what you're planting and where you're planting it for fall, because what we don't want is you to continue to get out there and misfire when it comes to your fall garden. Like we want to set you up for success.
Yeah.
And the act of wanting a fall garden is a step. The act of getting seeds started is a step. But let's make sure your placement is
So
proper.
I have to say I've been playing with my spacing a lot this year,
Hmm.
and I believe you and I both owe the backyard gardens community an apology
Mm.
because what I've witnessed in my garden this year, I have realized that we have not spoken enough about spacing over the years.
Hmm.
I have some serious transformations in my garden based on the spacing that I've done. And it's been, I've been working on it over the years,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I've had some mishaps and some strong winds and stuff like that. But And not everything that I've done is by the book, and I've done some adjustments and changed things back and forth and whatnot. But what I'll say is spacing is so damn important.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to do. So hard to do. But I think we do need to begin to speak more about it because, you saw the picture of my corn bed. Best
Yeah.
corn I've ever had.
Yeah.
My broccoli bed this year, best broccoli I've ever had. And that was last year's spacing. My cabbages, best cabbages I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's all because of the spacing. Well, it's because of a lot of things, but the spacing really helps because exactly what you said. You start getting those yellow leaves, man. It's, especially on the bottoms, that just means there's not enough spacing. And as you
Mm-hmm.
lose those leaves, you lose sources of, ways for the plant to get nutrition from the sun. So we need to really think about that as we do this. And I know it's tempting, but
Each time I've planted, it's in that 10 by, I don't know which one goes first, 3.5 feet by 10 feet bed.
mm-hmm.
So that bed, first time I've ever planted potatoes there. And when I was planting them, and I almost always do this dance, I think I did, let's see, 6, 12, maybe, no. I did 3, 6, 7, 8, something like 8, 16, 22, or
What in
something
the
plant.
hell are you talking about?
I'm sorry.
This is so many
I'm counting
numbers.
in my head the number of potatoes that I put
Now
down.
you're counting out loud.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So what I do know when I was planting them was, these are going to be a little bit closer. They could probably use more room. But I had so many seed potatoes and I wanted to get them planted. And this growing year, now I haven't harvested potatoes yet, but it's showing me just based on the growth pattern, I could have cut 25% out of that bed as far as how many. So if I have, let's call it easy math, 20 plants in there, 20 potatoes in there, and 20 plants in there, then I could have gone with something like 16, right? And I'm going to potentially have a better yield of potatoes. But again, we'll see. Um, and sometimes you have to burn yourself, right? To know not to touch the stove again, to know to make the adjustment. And we may be there with this year. Now, on the bright side of things, I probably won't grow potatoes in a bed that size, but it doesn't mean can't take the lessons forward.
Let me ask you this. How many times have you burnt yourself with spacing? Versus how many times have you burnt yourself on a stove, but you didn't touch the stove, but you kept doing the same spacing?
I have this one pot that I love. It has like the ridges in it. It's a pan, but the pan doesn't like it's no guard around it. Like it's like it's not exactly cast iron. It doesn't protect you. And every time I cook in it, every other time I cook in it, I touch the pan, forgetting that the
Yeah.
pan is hot, quite literally. But I like cooking in that pan. Every season, spacing burns me.
There is.
Every season, I try to squeeze more in
Yep.
than I probably should. I bet I did it this year with tomatoes. They're not big enough for me to feel the pain of them. And I refuse to recognize that I'm creating more heartburn for myself during the growing season. And that's even before we get to the impact on the actual production.
So I put myself on the spot. My spacing burnt me every year for about 15 years before I started really going back and being like, what? And it's still, even this year, it's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There's still
Mm-hmm.
problems out there. Don't
Yeah.
get me, don't think I'm sitting here and be like, I got it perfect. That is absolutely not the case. But, it's just one of those things. So we did a spacing episode earlier this year. I think, and we'll have to discuss this later, if you think you agree that we should really get into a little bit more depth about it, especially as the seasons come along.
Yeah, I do. And I do want to make one last comment about spacing as it relates to fall. You probably don't need as much as you think you need as far as planting goes.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're at the beginning of the season, similar to why some of us start tomato seeds, 6 months in advance, we just want to do it all. at the end of the season, some of the challenges we face are fatigue, right? It's the trying to squeeze things in, right? And the reality is, I don't need 40 heads of lettuce in my garden for fall. I didn't need it for spring either. I didn't have 40, but I did have a lot. So consider that, because, again, last chance for the growing year. You are better off with kind of abiding by spacing guidelines than not. And I'll leave it there.
So I'm going to ask a rhetorical question before we go to the
Mhm.
question of the day. Which do you get more out of? 8 5-pound cabbages or 12 1-pound cabbages? Let's leave it at that. All right. So all of this can be solved easily if you get the planter app. So check out the planter app. It has the spacing built in. Make your fall gardens. Look at the times on it. Use the drag and drop interface to make the actual, to see visually how it does, and then play with it a little bit. So use the planter app to your advantage. For instance, if you go to plant carrots, it puts a carrot on there, but then there's a little number in the corner that says 16. That means you can put 16 of them in that square foot box. So just keep that in mind as you go forward into planning your garden. It's a sponsor of the show for a good reason. We love it. We use it. We abide by it. Check out the Planter app. That's the PLANTER app. Did I spell it right? I don't even know. It's available on Google and Apple. You can use it on your tablet, PC, or your phone. Plan your garden anywhere at any time. All right. With that being said, our question, actually it's more of a comment today, comes from Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Every time, man. Every time.
It's always a different reason why.
It is.
We can't get our timing right.
Gosh, how many years are we going to do this? Okay, so Laura simply writes, I just want to thank you for the podcast. I listen while working on a production line. No YouTube for me. I think it's a sad smile, a sad face. Every episode I learn something, come away with an idea for me to have things validated. Thank you very much. And with that said, you are very welcome, Laura.
So let me tell you about some BTS behind the scenes.
Mm.
Young Ben told me we had a comment that he wanted to share. And I asked, is it going to make me cry? He's like, no.
Yeah, that makes you cry?
It better not. And here, it doesn't make it, I'm not fighting back tears, but it's super special, right? So it makes me think about where I listen to our episodes at. I don't, like, maybe 8 out of 10 I kind of go back to and listen, but there are moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not in the place, like, mindset to listen to them. And most times I press play when I have my coffee and I'm about to walk out the door into the garden, right? So to hear the routine that people have when they listen, we get a lot of people that still spend time in their cars and that listen. I haven't heard anybody on a treadmill listening, but to hear Laura that she's on the production line listening. We're a part of people's day.
It's weird.
Like that. Yeah,
It's weird
man.
to me.
And
But
it's just not like they're forced to listen to it. Like,
No, and I'm
Laura's
happy.
making a choice here.
Yeah, thank you,
Super
Laura.
cool, man.
Laura sent that to us through our email, bygquestion@gmail.com. If you can't remember what I said, the link is below. Send us a question there or a comment. We like to hear your comments. But no, I agree. For many years, podcast got me through the roughest part of my days. And for a long time, I would have my phone when I worked in an office, and I'd have my phone and I'd watch on YouTube all day, different podcasts and stuff like that. And that was actually how I really started to develop my gardening knowledge, was through that, because I would just let it play 8 hours a day, just something to, my job was very monotonous, and I could listen. So, if you're sitting at a desk, put us on your phone on YouTube. We'd love for you
Yeah,
to watch
man.
us.
There's I mean I listen to different genres of things, watch different genres of things, and it's interesting because when it comes to some podcasts, and it's not about popularity necessarily. I receive it as someone giving me this information, but it's not as if like I feel like we're regular people, right? And some of the comments that we get
I'm not regular. You may
around
be.
yeah, some of the comments we get around the podcast, I'm gonna keep on going. You see what I'm dealing with, Laura? You hear what I'm dealing with, Laura? Some of the comments we get around the podcast, it's like this could be the person 2 doors down that I'm gardening with,
Yeah.
that's commenting. And that makes me feel like the work that we're doing here, because it is work. Let's just be realistic. But it's so enjoyable. Yesterday we were on the phone. And I was saying like, who are these people that have these jobs that they love to go to? I was joking about a show, a drama that I was watching, and all of these shows, it's like a lot of the police work, and it's like take some time off. You need to take some time off, and they're like, no, I'm coming in tomorrow. And I'm all like, they love this job so much. And it's funny because it was more rhetorical yesterday, but what we do, like, we sit down, and if we could talk garden talk for 8 hours, we would. Maybe 6 hours. Six
Yeah,
hours
6
sounds
hours.
good.
I need a 2 hour break.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, thanks again, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
That's me making up for the botched job I did with the the opening
That was brutal.
question of the day.
That was brutal. But on that note, I got myself a little bit dehydrated yesterday in the heat, and I have been drinking a lot, and I have to get rid of some of that. So we're going to cut this episode right here. If you
Way
want
to
to.
bring us back down and remind folks we're regular people.
Yeah, oh, we are regular. Let me tell you. I drank over a gallon of water yesterday and about a half a gallon so far today. I am good to go. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by becoming a subscriber, Apple subscriber. Do that. You'll get an extra episode every month. Come see us on YouTube. It will help support the show eventually. We would like to get enough subscribers in there to open up for people to become members to see all of the episodes that we've recorded that are members only, that are just put away. We want to open those up on YouTube, but we cannot do that without you coming to subscribe and like. So we want to share that with everybody. And all the other stuff. Come buy some seeds from us. Get that special deal and enjoy, because it is fall planting season. It is time, and we want you to have a fall garden. A true cool season fall garden that will grow into the winter season. And with that being said, let's continue to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.